everybody this morning. I know that I already saw a horde of people in and out of the fellowship hall, and I know that before long that smell will walk its way. So I've already seen a couple of people bringing some more food in. I know we'll have some trickle in and out. It's good to see everybody today. Hope everybody's looking forward to our day today. Of course, we're excited again to have Brother Stan Dean with us. He did a fantastic job presenting 2 lessons for us yesterday. Of course, those are archived on our YouTube and Facebook pages. If you'd like to go back and watch those, I would encourage you to do so. Looking forward to 3 additional lessons from him today. He'll teach Bible class. He will preach during worship hour at 10:30. We'll break for lunch, and then afterwards he'll give us kind of a call to action, a final resolution before we all go home and pass out for a Sunday afternoon nap. So we've given him that responsibility after we all get full. So we're going to have him all day today. Excited to have him with us. And for those of you who don't know him, he is from the Florence area, lives in Killen, preaches at the Killen Church of Christ. And so we're excited to have him here. I'm sure he'll share some about himself during his lesson, and I know you'll enjoy it. We will, in just a moment, begin with a prayer. Mr. Gerald, if I could have you to just lead us in a quick prayer before we start Bible class, and then we'll turn it over to Brother Stan.
Father, we're blessed to be able to come together this morning and hear your word applying to us. We're praying that as we are here in attendance today, that we'll impart to the things that are said, that will encourage us and strengthen us in our everyday life. We pray you'll continue to bless the churches that work here. Even Brother Stan, as he brings a lesson to us this morning, he'll remember those things that he's prepared. Ask that you continue with us in Christ's name we pray.
Amen. Good morning, church. It is good to see you. It is great to be back again today. Enjoyed yesterday so much. I got to go out and have a fine meal last night. It took a while, but you can ask the folks about that, but that was fun. It just gave us more time for fellowship, and we enjoyed being with all of you, and you made us feel so welcome. And we appreciate you, and it's good to be with you today. We pray always that what we do, that God will be glorified, and that everyone can be uplifted by our time together. As I told you yesterday, the way I like to do things is kind of my pattern. I usually start out here, and then I kind of work my way in. So yesterday, we kind of did exactly that. We started out here, and then we moved in a little bit, and today we're going to get a little more specific about some things, and this morning, I want us to talk about family finances. You might say, well, why family finances? Well, according to a lot of statistics that are out there, we're learning that now money problems are a leading cause of divorce of families. Sometimes we have too much, sometimes we don't have enough. We will talk about different ways that we might look at that. But today I want us to think about that because I feel it's very important that we deal with this, and I hope there's something here that will help all of us. I'm sure there are a lot of you here that do well. I'd like to think that we all do well in managing our money and good stewards of what we have, but I would also think that probably that is not true with everybody if you're like the average group that I'll see anywhere. Let me tell you right up front, I'm not a CPA. I'm not a family planner of finances and those kinds of things, but I do hold an honorary degree from the University of Hard Knocks. Okay, so you know, I haven't really gone down a bad road, or we haven't, but we've learned some things as we have gone through the years, and I want to share a few of those things with you this morning. Dave Ramsey says that finances are either the best or the worst source of communication with couples. And think about that. Now let me ask you this. Think back, and I know you may have to think back a long way, but think about the last disagreement that you've had with your mate. And more than likely, it had something to do with money. That's how it plays into our lives. Many years ago, Judy and I had only been married maybe a couple of years at the time. There was a preacher from Danville, Illinois. We were living in Bismarck, a little farming town north of there, about 10 miles at that time. And he said, there's a guy coming through here this afternoon. I know it's kind of late to be putting something like this together, but we're going to have a little seminar here, a money seminar. And he said they've asked us to invite any church leaders that we can. And he said a lot of preachers are available. So if you want to come on down about 1 o'clock, Come on down and join us. I said, well, I'd like to. I've got a lot to learn. You see, when I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of financial training. Now, that's not to say that my mom and dad were head over heels in debt. It wasn't that. They just didn't teach us a lot about money. And so I was floundering around just trying to learn things. About the only thing I remember being taught by my dad in the way of money is if you don't have the money to pay for something cash, then you can buy it on easy terms, but just be honest enough to pay it back. That's about all I knew about money, okay? So they called us and invited me down. Judy wasn't able to go. And I remember there were about 30 or 35 preachers, and there were a couple of elders that were in that assembly that afternoon. And the guy that presented it opened my eyes to some things, but one of the first questions he asked kind of floored me. And he said, how many of you today, if your refrigerator went out, could go out and buy another? Not talking about something that needs repair, but if you had to go out and buy a refrigerator right now, if you had to do it today, how many of you could do that and pay cash for it without having to borrow money? And I thought of all times to be sitting on the front row. And because I thought, I'm not going to raise my hand, I'm not going to lie about it, and I'm sitting on my hands. I thought I couldn't go out and buy one. Of course, that was years ago. That was the average price at that time, is about $400. It's many more times that now, but I couldn't have done it. And I thought, he said, okay, I want you to look around. I'm thinking, everybody just look up here at me. I'm the one that didn't raise my hand. But looked around, there were 4 of that 30 plus that were in that assembly that said that they could do that. He says, this happens about everywhere I go. Now, he wasn't talking only about preachers, and I know that preachers may have their problems, and Josh surely doesn't because I've been impressed with him, but I'm just saying that as we think about that, we all probably could do better. That guy also taught me that you'll be a much happier person and maybe even a better preacher if you would get on a budget and learn how to live by one. I didn't know too much about that at the time, but he taught us how to do one. I'll talk about that more specifically in just a short period of time here, but we did that. I'm not so sure it made me a better preacher, but it made me a happier preacher because we don't have to worry about finances. Judy and I never have to argue about finances. We don't have to argue about anything, but we don't have disagreements about money because we're on the same page as to how it goes. So I'm going to suggest some things this morning maybe that will help us to open our eyes, and some of you that do well. If you've got something where you want to chime in, feel free to do so. This is a Bible class, and we can learn from you too, because, like I say, I'm a fellow struggler. Number one, I would say, if you're not already, my suggestion would be find your way out of debt and stay out of debt. Proverbs 22 and verse 7. I mentioned Dave Ramsey a while ago. If you ever listen to him, and I'm not saying that he's the guru that everybody ought to listen to, but he does have some good things to say. But this is one of his favorite verses, and he says, of course, Solomon said it, but the rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. If you've ever had those occasions when the wolves are howling at the door, you begin to understand that quite well, that there are folks that are always wanting their money, whether you have it or not. If you owe them, they expect you to pay them. And that's just the way it works. As we think about debt, we know that Americans generally don't do very well with their money. I'm going to suggest to you some things, talk to you in just a minute about some alarming facts about Americans and their money. Number one, 64% of Americans say that they live from paycheck to paycheck. And that just means that if we miss a paycheck, then we're going to be in trouble. The wolves will be howling at the door. 64% of Americans, that seems like a lot, but that's what the statistics tell us. Most people who are in financial problems or trouble are in also a state of denial. In other words, yeah, I got problems, but I don't want to admit it. Let me tell you about a gentleman several years ago that came in to visit me. Now, this is an engineer, and a very high-profile engineer that made a tremendous salary. His wife also was a professional, and she made a very good salary also. But that day, I suppose he was just burdened, and he came in to talk to me, and he sat down. He said, Brother Stan, he said, I hope that what we're talking about here is confidential, and it is, because I would never tell you who it was, and you wouldn't know anyway. But he said, my wife and I are grossly in debt. And I'm thinking, I know where you live. You don't live in an extravagant house and those kinds of things. But he said, we're grossly in debt. And a man that smart sat there and told me, I have said to my wife, if we can just make it to retirement, we'll be all right. And I'm thinking, how in the world is that going to solve your problems just making to retirement if you're head over heels in debt as it is? Because those of you that are retired, you realize that that doesn't solve the problems, does it? Okay? So you have to get to, if you're going to be solved, they need to be solved before you get there. But a lot of those folks are. Have you ever seen that commercial on TV? I haven't seen it lately, but it's this guy. He comes out of his house, and it's a fine house. I mean, in one of the ritzy neighborhoods, and he says, yeah, this is mine. He goes out and gets in a brand new SUV. Nothing wrong with that if you can afford it, but he gets in this brand new SUV. He said, yes, this is mine too. And then he drives off down to the country club. He said, yes, we're members here. And he pulls out one of the finest sets of golf clubs, and he said, yeah, these are mine too. And on that goes, but he finally says, do you know how we afford all of this? He said, we're up to eyeballs in debt. Well, I think he was telling the truth, but that, of course, went on to say that there's a better way of doing things. Now, if you've got money, God bless you. If you can do those things, you can live in a nice house, I don't think that God condemns us for having things, and I think that sometimes we're almost made to feel guilty if we have anything in this world. The problem is not that we have something. The problem is how we use what we have. And if we don't use it for God's glory, then that's where the problem comes in. 68% of Americans admit that they have no budget at all. Now, we just kind of make it much. Some folks handle things pretty well in their heads and they learn how to do things, but 68% of Americans say, nope, don't have one, don't want one. One spit on the ground every time you mention one because they think it's a dirty word. But it really isn't. 7 out of 10 Americans have less than $1,000 in a savings account. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? $1,000 won't buy you much of a refrigerator more, especially a new one. And just think about that's the state that most Americans are in. Half of Americans have no retirement savings at all. No retirement savings at all. Half of Americans. The average retirement savings account is $95,776. You might say, well, that's quite a bit of money. Well, maybe for a year or two, it might be pretty good. But you know, as I know, living in this world, that's not going to take you too long down the road if that's all that you've got. Redbook magazine reports that over 30% of married couples, and here is where we start running into problems with marriages, lie to each other regularly about money. Maybe he goes out and buys something. Well, I didn't pay much for it. Well, how much? Well, not much. We don't want to admit. And maybe she, and it can go both ways, or both can have that problem. I mentioned yesterday a couple of times about doing premarital counseling. One of the questions I always ask the couple is, are you a spender or a saver? You're one or the other. And usually they admit it pretty much up front. Here's the way that usually works. If you got two savers, you're going to be in probably pretty good shape financially. If you've got a spender and a saver, probably they can kind of keep each other in check, so probably they're going to make it all right. But if you've got two spenders, you've got some work to do, because that is not a good thing if you have two spenders, and sometimes it turns out that way, so we have to do a little more work in that area. And this goes back to what I said a moment ago about many statistics that are out there. Money has become the #1 cause of divorce, according to those studies. Next, I kind of like this. The most expensive thing you'll ever own is an out-of-control ego. We often buy things with money we don't have. And we often buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people that we don't like. And I suppose if we're really honest, that's the way it sometimes goes with our financial things. The average household debt in America has increased by 11% in the last decade. Where's our money going? A large percent is paid on debt. Credit card debt, for those who carry a balance, and this is per person now, $6,194. And I just looked this up the other day to make sure that my statistics were right. The average interest rate on those cards is 16.4%. That is a lot of interest. And a lot of folks, that's all they do is pay the interest, never touch the principal. The average car payment now in America is $780 a month. Do you know how much somebody tell me, you probably know this. How much is the average price of a new car now? Okay. $57,058 is the latest I've heard, so you're right at it. $58,000 is the average price for a new car. What is the average price for a used car now? close. The last I heard is $28,000 for a used car. Now, it used to be, and it seems like it hasn't been very long ago, that you could take $15,000, you could buy a fine used car. But boy, you can't do that now, can you? And if you're looking for a specific one, you may have trouble even finding one. But we learned that this is the way it is. I never recommend a lease, but it says that even if you want to lease one, you have to spend $506 a month on average for what it would cost. The average car payment for 84 months is $526. And of course, $780, $526 for a used car. And then we get on beyond that, and we learn the average college grad now comes out of the graduation with a diploma in one hand and a bill of $32,731 in the other. Oh, that's good. You like that, huh? Yeah. and then that is going to amount to about $393 you're going to be paying per month. Now, I know that there's some folks that are sitting back, keeping their fingers crossed, and hope the government's going to bail you out, but I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. In fact, I don't. After paying for 3 college degrees, along with mine, I don't think that I want to even go there. But anyway, I'll just say that I don't know how you feel about that, but that's my feeling. I think you picked up on that. The average Americans spend over $230 per month eating out. Nothing wrong with eating out if you can afford it, but you can learn that it might run you into problems if you can't afford it. The average cell phone bill, this kind of blows my mind, the average cell phone bill for a carrier is $114 a month. Not only that, but this one maybe blows my mind a little more. The average TV bill, we're talking about for a paid service, the average, $217 a month. And I'm thinking, for what? If you watch TV like I do, I mean, I love football, but I don't think I want to pay $217 a month just to watch football. But I'm just saying that's the average bill. Everybody out there has a plan for how you need to spend your money. And if I'm in retail, I'm going to study these things too. Some of you have seen these things. Walmart figured out all they have to do is give you a larger shopping cart, and they find out that you'll buy more because you got to fill up that cart, right? So if it's bigger, you don't have many things in there. And it seems like we don't even cover up the bottom, and it's $100. And it's just amazing what it costs anymore. I got tickled. Somebody told me back here a couple of months ago when eggs were so high. They said everything has gotten so high it will cost you an arm and an egg. Well, it's expensive just to live, and we all know that. But if you don't make a plan of how to spend your money, there are folks out there that are planning that for you. That's the reason a budget is important. The first budget that Judy and I ever did was actually based on 6 weeks. I know that most of them go month to month, and I'm not telling you how to do it. I'm just telling you that you need one, and you can choose the one that fits your situation best. But this one was based on 6 weeks. And we were not behind on our bills, but it always was that, and we never had anything left over. It seemed like we just spent every penny that we had, and it didn't seem like we're spending that much. Just everything went out to expenses that we had just to get by. So I remember the first budget we made out, and most of you know that when you make out a budget, you get all your expenses, you put those down, you average them out of what it's going to cost you a month and what your income is, and that's how you work it. So we thought of everything that we had, groceries and light bill and everything that we would involve in a particular, maybe a month or 6 weeks. And so put all those down. And we figured out how much we were paying for all of those, and we averaged all of that out. And when we got to the end of that, at the end of 6 weeks, it says we had $400 left over. And I told Judy, we left out something. I said, there's no way we have $400 left over because we never have $400 left over. Well, anyway, we thought, well, we'll figure it out as we go along. And sure enough, at the end of that 6 weeks, we had $400 left over. And we thought, we can go out there. No, we didn't do that. But it told us that a lot of our money was being frittered away, just slipping through our fingers, and we didn't know it. And what we learned and what we've learned for the last 40 years living on a budget is that we have more spendable income living on a budget than we ever had before, which is really just planned spending. So it's amazing what it can do for you to have a little planned spending along the way. So that leads us to the next thing. I would encourage you to develop a budget and live by it. Proverbs 21 and verse 20, we're learning in the house of the wise, there are stores of food and oil, but a fool devours all that he has. And that kind of goes back to the same thing we were just talking about. A budget has helped us a lot through the years, and I'm not going to tell you that we're the richest people on the face of the earth, but God has blessed us, and like I say, we make it fine in life, and this is not a real problem area for us. And I'm thankful for that. We feel blessed, not because we're so smart, but we're thankful that God gave us some folks that helped us to figure this out along the way. It's interesting to me that there are some folks that seem to have so little as far as income, but they always have everything they need. And then there are folks, on the other hand, that seem to make huge salaries, but it seems like they just can't get by. But it all has to do with up here, doesn't it? It's more between the ears of what's going on. It's not really what's in the pocketbook. And it's how we use our money that really will determine our financial future, not how much we make. I remember speaking in Russellville, Alabama, a few years ago, and we were talking about this very thing, and there was a retired banker. I did not know him at the time, very fine man, but he was still on the board of the bank. And I mentioned about a situation that I'd heard about. There was a surgeon, made $400,000 a year at that time. And he went to the bank for a $10,000 loan. And I'm kind of thinking, why is somebody that makes $400,000 a year, why are they going to the bank for a $10,000 loan? That didn't make any sense to me to begin with. But he did. And after they looked at his financial record, they turned him down because his credit record was so bad. After that service that night, that gentleman came up and introduced himself, and a fine gentleman. And he said, we had a similar situation to happen just a couple of weeks ago. That there was a man that just made a tremendous salary. But yet, he was asking us for a loan. I think it might have been $20,000. He said, we had to turn him down, because we felt that would be a high risk and just couldn't do it. On the other hand, there are some folks that might make a very small salary in figures. However, you think if that fellow needs money, that lady needs money, we'll let them have it because we know it's coming back because they're people of integrity. Two things I would say about a budget. Number one, when you get on one, you need one thing in particular, and that is you need an emergency fund, because unexpected bill is going to show up. Unexpected bill is always going to show up. It may be that, like happened to me not too long ago, I still don't know what happened, but all of a sudden my truck light came on that says I've got a tire that says something's not right. And after a while I'm driving and I thought something is really not right, and I got out, and what it looked like was a huge Allen wrench that had gone through the sidewall of my tire. And I thought, first of all, didn't hear it, didn't see it, didn't know what was going to happen. But about 130 or 40 bucks later, I realized that that's what I had to do, because you can't repair when that sidewall is knocked out like that. Well, thankfully, we had the money to cover that. If our refrigerator went out now, I'm not bragging, I'm just saying we learned a long time ago. But if our refrigerator went out today, and I hope it doesn't, we could actually go out and buy another one without having to borrow the money or putting it on easy terms to do so. And there's a lot of financial security in that, but what I'm saying is that emergency fund, if it's not there, your budget is going to be wrecked, because unexpected bill is going to come along and you won't know where the money is coming from. And that usually when folks get off a budget, then they think, well, we're off of it now, we might as well go ahead, and then we really get down the wrong lane. The other thing I would say about this is that when you develop a budget, think about the future. Now, I know that there is a sin in hoarding. I would never encourage hoarding of anyone. But you've got to think about the future. And if you've got small kids, and one day they are going to college, then you've got a big bill that's coming down the line. All of ours went through Freed-Hardeman, which is a private college. And I promised them, Judy and I promised them, that we will pay through a bachelor's degree. You go as far as you want to go. God bless you after that, because you've got it. But we will pay through that. And that wasn't easy to do. We paid as we went, and it was not an easy thing to do. But if you don't prepare for that, then you're going to be in trouble. When you get there, you're going to end up with one of those big bills at the end of the day. The second thing that I would say is that if you will start early in your retirement fund, you won't have to put a lot. But you will rise up and call me blessed when you get to retirement age. The real kicker is that you start early. I'm not going to tell you what to invest in, but I'll tell you this. If you don't understand it, don't invest in it. And number two, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And so that is the advice I'm going to give you, other than the fact that if you'll start early, you will find that there is a tremendous blessing in that. Probably this is going to be probably about as much important, point that I will make about any of this, and that is it takes discipline. It takes discipline. Proverbs 16, verse 32, a man that rules his own spirit is better than he that takes his city. If we don't have discipline about ourselves, we're probably not going to do very well with our finances. Sometimes we just have to say no. We don't have the money for it. Now, we may want it. We may want it badly. Let me tell you one of those early School of Hard Knocks things that I went through. I don't know why. I've never been big into just material things per se. But I always, and they were popular at this time. We hadn't been married all that long. But those rings that men were wearing at the time that had a diamond in them, I just liked. I don't want one now. But at that time, they just looked like the finest little ring, and I thought I'd like to have one. And Judy has always been very supportive, and she said, well, you know, let's find you one. I didn't want just any one. I wanted one that I liked. So we happened to be down at the mall, which is probably the worst place to look for jewelry, but just happened to be at the mall one night. And I don't think we even had kids at the time. But I remember that I saw one, and the way it was made, I loved that thing. I thought, whoo, there's the one I want. That's the one I've been looking for. There's that pearl of great price, okay? There's that diamond I've been looking. There's that ring. It was $400. We didn't have $400. But Judah said, listen, if it make you happy, go ahead and get it. Well, I thought it was going to make me happy. So I bought it that night, put it on easy terms. I couldn't sleep when I went home that night. I thought that was the stupidest thing I've ever done. I couldn't wait till they opened next day so that I could return that. They did have a 3-day return policy, and I guess it taught me a lesson because I've never wanted one since, but I'm just saying that wasn't very disciplined on my part, but I've kind of learned from that. We've learned that we don't make any major purchase without sleeping on it first. If we want something, let's sleep on it. And sometimes we might still want it the next day, but a lot of times we find out, didn't really need that after all. But there's where that discipline comes in, and if we don't have it, we're going to be in trouble. Next, we need to learn the paradox that we have to give in order to receive. Now, Jesus taught us that, you'll remember. He said, give and it shall be what? Given unto you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, shall be measured in your bosom. For what measurement you use, it shall be measured back to you again. So the Lord taught us that a long time ago. You might say, well, Brother Stan, it sounds like to me you're trying to tell us that we need to save money and such like. Well, to some degree I am. But more than that, I'm trying to teach us how to be good stewards of what we have. And it's not always saving everything. Sometimes it's the giving. And it's amazing to me, and I don't know that many of us have ever put the Lord to the test on this, but if you read Malachi lately, you'll remember the Lord said, what? Give, and what's going to happen? I'm going to give back. I'm going to open the windows of heaven, and I'm going to give you such a blessing you won't be able to receive it. I don't know of any, but the Lord said, He challenged. He said, try me in this matter. And I don't think that many of us have done that, but I think that what I learned in life, that the givers are the happiest people of all. I'm not talking about the people that just throw money away. I'm talking about the givers. Let me ask you something. The elders didn't say anything, just looking at your board. I would say that from what I see, you probably are very good givers here, so I don't have any ulterior motive for bringing this up. But I want to ask you something. Do you feel good about your giving? I'm talking about to the church. Do you feel good about your giving? How much does the average person give? How much does the average Christian give to the church? Best statistics that we have out there say about 2 to 3%. That's the average. I know that some folks do much better than that. But I'm saying that's about the average giver, about 2 to 3%. That's about as well as we do. I don't think that's good. But if we are going to receive, we learned that Jesus taught us it's more blessed to give than it is to receive. And when we use our money properly, and when we learn how to get in control of our money, and going back to another Ramsey statement, making our money behave, then we learn that we've got more to give. There are some folks that have come to me and say, Brother Stan, I agree. I think it's right. You're on the right track with that. We'd like to give more, but I don't know how we can. We've got so many bills. We don't know. I don't know how in the world we'd ever give 10% or even 5% of our income. I said, well, you got to get it under control. And when you get out of debt, you'll learn you got a whole lot more money, and you'll be able to do that, and you'll feel better about your giving, and it will make you happier, and you'll be more fulfilled in your life too. But that's exactly what the Lord said. We've got to learn the paradox that we really have to be givers before the Lord blesses us, and that's what He said. Now, I'm not the prosperity preacher that says, you know, you give 10 and God's going to give you 100 back. God never promised that, but He did promise that He'll bless us when we learn how to give. That's a part of using our money as we should. Next, don't fall in love with money. That's the problem, isn't it? It's not really the money in and of itself, but it's falling in love with that money. For the love of the money is the root of what? All kinds of evil, and it is. If we love money, then we have misplaced our affection. Money can be a very good thing, and you know that. But at the same time, never something to fall in love with. Moving on, don't be deceived into thinking that money can solve all your problems. Boy, if we just had a little more money, if we just had this much money, then I think that we'd be, but I tell you what happens. When you get that much money, then you raise your standard of living. That's just kind of the way it goes for most of us. And then, well, you know, I never thought I'd make that kind of money, but after a while, if you don't have control of your money, you're right back in the same boat that you were before. And you're just as much in debt as you were before because you haven't made any changes in your life to make your money behave. And so you're just as bad in debt when you make this salary as you did this one. Had a guy told me right after I got out of high school, we were driving down the road together one day, which I did at the time when I was working for my uncle right out of high school. He said, let me tell you something, son. Several years older than me. He said, let me tell you something. You can spend $5,000 a week just as easily as you can spend $500. And I'm thinking, you're crazy. But boy, was he right. He was right. It's not the amount per se. Now, if you don't have any money, yes, it can make you happier to get some, but that's usually not the problem. Something that happens a lot in our society today, it's not that we don't have enough money. Sometimes we maybe have an abundance of money, and with our kids, we don't know exactly how to help them. And sometimes our kids need to learn how to swim themselves. And they don't always need to have that safety net of mom and dad or grandma and grandpa standing behind them and thinking that I can do whatever because they'll take care of it if I don't. We're hurting our kids if they don't learn how to manage money themselves. Sometimes we think, well, if I got money, it make me important. Well, by the world standards, I suppose there's some truth in that, but not according to the way the Lord looks at it, because He owns it all anyway. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Everything ultimately belongs to God. We're just stewards, right? Amen? Amen? Okay, good. I just wanted to see if you could say that. Okay, Jesus said in Luke chapter 12 and verse 15 that a man's life, listen to this, a man's life does not consist in the abundance of things that he possesses. In other words, you're not going to impress the Lord by how much money you've got in the bank, or the size house you've got, or the car you drive, or those kinds of things. God said it all belongs to me anyway, and that's not going to impress me. But we sometimes think, and money gives that illusion, that if we just have enough of it, then all of our problems would be solved. Here's what sometimes happens. Here's a man that's sitting at home and things aren't going very well. They're fussing and griping, they can't get along, and it seems like just kind of a war zone around there. So he picks up a magazine one day and he's flipping through it, and he sees this family that's sitting by a campfire off out by the river camping. And they're sitting around that campfire and they're smiling and it looks like they're having the biggest time and things are going so well for them. And he thinks, that's what we need. That is the answer, right? That's what we don't have. So he goes out and he buys a camper that he can't afford. And he buys all this camping equipment that he doesn't know how to use. And he gets the family together and he plans, and nothing wrong with camping. So don't get me wrong, you know, they're campers. So let me kind of up front say nothing wrong with camping. But he's looking for something that most campers aren't looking for. And he thinks, okay, we've got all this equipment, and next weekend, family, we're going to go camping. So they get all of this gear together that they don't know how to use, and they get in that camper, and they go out to this place, and they rent this little spot out there, and they go out and they build that campfire, and they're all sitting there fussing and carrying on just like the way they were at home, because they carried the same problems at home out there with them, and they were the same at the campfire as they were back at the house. It was an illusion of thinking that, well, if we just did this, this will make us happy. If we'll just buy into this, it will make us happy. But it really isn't true. Happiness begins at home, and if you're not happy at home, you're not going to be happy out by the campfire either. And if you're not happy having a little money, don't think that having a lot of money is going to make you real happy, because it won't. It could, but it won't if you're just depending on money. That's just an illusion. It's not really the truth. Remember that money is just a small part of the big picture. I'm reminded of the rich farmer in Luke chapter 12. When all those crops came in, he said, "Whoo, man, what in the world am I going to do?" And we know from reading the text that he was selfish. He didn't think about how he could help other folks with that. But he said, I know what I'll do. I'll just have to tear down my little barns and build some big barns, and I'll store all my goods there, and I can tell myself to take it easy and eat, drink, and be merry, because you've got it made. But right after that, you remember the Lord speaks. And the Lord says, "You fool." Not exactly what he had in mind, was it? But the Lord says, "You fool, this night your soul is going to be taken from you, and then who shall these things be which you have provided?" That brings it down to perspective, doesn't it? Judy and I sometimes laugh with the few material possessions we have. I don't know that this will impress you or not. Probably not. I'm a clown collector, okay? Not just any clown. I like Emmett Kelly clowns, and I've got a bunch of them. And to me, I don't trade in. I don't know why. I probably do, but I just like clowns, okay? Judy used to collect bears and such like, but what we have, we don't keep real expensive things around our place, and they're just not that important to us. But what we do have, we kind of like. But we figure that if something were to happen to us today, our kids sell everything we got in a yard sale except their TVs. That's kind of the way we look at it, But money, material things, when it really comes down to it, they're just a small part of the bigger picture. I hold in my hand a dime. Okay, this is a U.S. dime, smallest denomination that we have in our currency. It amounts to 10 cents. I can hold it off out there like that, and I can look at every one of you, and it barely impedes my vision at all. However, the closer I put it to me, the more I block you out. And I can block out pretty well just about everything if I get close enough to my eyeball that I can't see around it. And that's the way that we think about money, and maybe we should say, well, you ought to think about money, because we hold it out here, we have a pretty good perspective on it. It's just a small part of the bigger picture of life. But when we get it too close to us, it starts blocking out the things that are the most important in life. So these are some of the things that I wanted us to think about this morning, and hopefully just some very practical things that will help us as families to realize that it all belongs to God. We're just to be good stewards of those things. But God will bless us through anything. And I believe that, yes, He expects us to use our talents to make a living. There's dignity in labor. I don't think we're just to sit back and think that God's going to throw it in our laps. As someone says, when we pray for something, we believe that God will deliver. Sometimes He may give you what you're asking for. Sometimes He may hand you a shovel. But however God chooses to do it, it's always the right way. You probably heard this little story, but I'll close with it today. A little girl was riding in a shopping cart with her mom. And as they're riding along, she's just a little girl, they're putting the groceries in, and they get up to what we call that impulse buying section that is right there before you get to the cash register. And they have all these little things, displayed there that you've got to have, or you're not going to be much of a person. And this little girl looks over there, and she sees this little string of beads, and they're just a cheap string of beads. It's just a child's toy, but she sees those, and, "Oh, Mommy, can I have that necklace? I want that necklace. Oh, Mommy, that's so pretty." And Mama says, no, honey, you don't need that. It's just, you wear it one time and throw it down. Oh, no, Mommy, if you buy it for me, I promise I'll wear it. And the mom thinks, well, it's not going to break the budget, so I'll go ahead and get it for you this time. So she buys her that little play necklace, and the little girl puts it around her neck, and she's so proud of it. But true to her word, she didn't just wear it one time, throw it down. She just kept on wearing it. And she was so proud of it. Her dad came in about the next night after she had gotten it and saw how attached to it she had become. And the dad sat down with her, and they had a little Bible story and a little story that he made up, and they had a prayer together. And he said, honey, I see you must really like that necklace you have on. She said, oh, Daddy, it's my favorite necklace of all. And he said, well, honey, he said, would you be willing to give that necklace to Daddy? And she said, oh, no, Daddy. That's my favorite necklace. She said, you can have one of my toys. And he said, no, I just wanted to see if you'd be willing to give it up. That's fine. You go ahead and wear it. Next night, the same scenario. He goes in, they have their Bible story, they have their prayer, and before he leaves, though, he said, honey, so you still got that necklace on? Oh, Daddy, this is my favorite of all time. He said, hon, would you be willing to let Daddy have that? No, please, Daddy, don't take my necklace. You can have one of my dollies, but don't take my necklace. He said, that's all right, honey. But the next night he comes in, she's sitting on the side of the bed, and she kind of has her head down. And he said, honey, is there a problem? And she holds out her hand like this, and like she's going to give him something. And he holds out his hand, and she drops that little necklace in his hand. And he said, here, or she said, here, Daddy. He said, it's yours. You can have my necklace if you really want it. And the daddy kind of shakes it around in his hand for a minute, and he sticks it down in his pocket. Then with his other hand, he reaches down to another pocket, and he pulls out a genuine string of pearls. And the little girl's eyes light up. And he puts those around her neck, and he said, here, honey, I want you to have these. And he said, I've had them all along, but I was just waiting for you to give up the cheap ones before I gave the ones that really matter. That's the way it is. Maybe that we hang on to the cheap things in life, and we make far too much out of them. They become far too important to us. Whereas if we hold those things loosely, then maybe God says, then I'll give you the treasures that will make you happier than you ever thought you would be. Families struggle with money, but I hope that maybe this will help some of us to have stronger families when it comes to our financial matters. Thank you so much for your kind attention.